Hello, my name is Shujat Ali. I'm a security and compliance engineer with Google Cloud Public Sector. In this user journey, I will be taking you through configuring your two-step verification, or some people call two-factor authentication, for a user, and enabling that for the user, and then showing user authentication to an application that's hosted on Google Cloud. And as a third leg of this user journey, we will log into a second application on Google Cloud to demonstrate single sign-on between the two applications, which are protected by Google Cloud. So let's get started. So as a first step, we will select a user. In this case, it's going to be Azure user 2. We'll select this user and enter his credential. Well, it's asking me to log in again. Once the user log in, the next step for us is for this user to configure his two-step verification. For that, we will go to the user account. And within user account, let me make this a little bit bigger here. Within the user account, we will go to the security tab. Within the security tab, you will notice that the two-step verification for this user is currently set to off, and we want to enable this. You've got some questions and some guidance on two-step verification. We'll get started. And it's asking me to log again, so I'll enter my credentials. At this point, it's asking me, because I want to set up SMS mobile-based authentication, so it's asking me to enter my mobile number, so I'll enter that. And I've chosen the text message there. At this point, it's Google Cloud has sent me a text message with a verification code that I will enter here. So at this point, I'm being asked if I want to turn on my two-factor two-step verification. I want to turn it on, and the way to validate that it's turned on is, you can see it's showing us right up there that two-factor is on for this user. If we want to further validate that, we can go to the account, and let's see here. We can just sign up from this account and show you that we'll sign up from this account. So log the user back in, and you will notice when we log in, you'll be asked for two-factor authentication. So we will enter our regular passcode. And at this point, I have received a code from Google Cloud, which I will enter here, and once I enter here this code, I'll be allowed access. And at this point, I'm allowed back access into my Google account. And what you will notice here is that at this point, my two-step verification is turned on. Now that I'm authenticated, the next thing I want to show, I'm going to log off. The user will enter their password. At that point, the user is challenged for their two-factor authentication, which is 464. At that point, the user is allowed URL for the second application. Paste it there. And as you can see, the user is signed in to the second application. The user was not challenged to enter their credentials. So that brings us to the end of this particular user journey. Thank you very much for watching this video.
Hey folks, ever since 2011, we have been leveraging the BeyondCorp Enterprise model, also known as Zero Trust, to protect access to our internal resources. In the past few years, we've made it easier for you to adopt the same model for your applications, APIs, and infrastructure through context-aware access capabilities that are natively built into our cloud platform. Context-aware access for the Cloud Console and the Google Cloud APIs, as well as applications that you might be hosting, whether in Google Cloud or on premises or any other cloud, provides the context-based rules. It's built on top of existing BeyondCorp Enterprise, endpoint verification and access context manager. In this demo specifically, what we're going to show you a user who has been given access to the Cloud Console from only their Windows machines. So the user who's logging into the Cloud Console has to verify through endpoint verification that they have the right username password, but also the right device context, meaning in this instance, they have to be logging in from a Windows machine to be able to log in to the Cloud Console. And this is pretty significant. If you have, in today's world, if your access credentials get, hacked or compromised, in this case, a hacker has to also understand the device context in order to log into the console to get access. You can instantiate these same principles in protecting your applications, your virtual machines, and APIs. So let's jump into the demo. So right now I am on a Mac machine. So let's look at the version of my machine. So I'm on Mac OS version 11.4. So theoretically in this instance, the user that I have should not be able to log into the console because it doesn't meet the device context, which is it is not a Windows-based machine. So here I am on the Google Cloud sign-in page where I'm going to sign in with my user. So I have a test account. I'm going to give it my credentials, and my access should be denied because my device doesn't meet the policies that are set up. So let's look at what happens when I log in from a machine that's a Windows-based machine. So now I'm on a Windows-based machine. So as you can see, I'm on a Microsoft Windows Server 2019 Data Center Edition with a specific OS version 10.0.17763. So now if I log in to the Google Cloud Console from a Windows machine, this user now should be able to access. As you can see, the user is able to sign in to the Cloud Console. So what's happening behind the scenes? Manager is deciding whether a user is allowed access to a specific resource that's protected by BeyondCorp Enterprise. So in this case, I am within the Google Cloud Console, and within the Cloud Console, I am within Security and Access Context Manager. Within the Access Context Manager, I have one of my policies, which is called a console policy, and it's operating in basic mode at the moment. But the basic gist of this policy is if I have a specific device policy that's set up that's saying users are allowed to access the console if they are logging in from an operating system that meets this version. Now, if a user is logging in from a Mac OS, as you saw earlier, was denied access to the Cloud Console. Same user, same password. However, the additional context off the device ensured that the user was not able to log in. And that is really powerful. Going back to my earlier point, where if a hacker or a bad actor has compromised your username and password, they still have to meet additional criteria to access your resources. These same policies can be extended to your web applications, to your SSH or RDP resources, APIs, and these resources can be on premises or any other cloud. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Shujaat Ali, and I'm a security and compliance custom engineer with Google Cloud. Today, I'm going to take you through a use case which will highlight the Google Cloud integration for SAML-based integration with Azure AD for application authentication. In terms of the steps that we will go through, we will use a user on Google Cloud who wishes to access an application hosted on Google Cloud, and this user will be routed to Azure AD to provide their credentials. The user will enter their credentials and will be successfully routed back to the application hosted on Google Cloud. All of this is because of the fact that the Google Cloud environment has been configured for SAML-based identity provider, which in this case is Azure Active Directory. Once the user logged in, to highlight single sign-on between different applications hosted on Google Cloud, we will then try to access another application using the same user, same browser, and you will see that the user this time around is not challenged for their credential, and the user will be allowed in to the second application. And following the second authentication or access to the application, I will then show you the configurations on both ends, i.e. the Azure Active Directory side of the house, and as well as the Google, as to what configurations have to be done to configure both sides for SAML-based authentication. So let's get started. First, I want to flow through the authentication here. So let me bring up a browser window here, and I'm going to get the URL for the first application. We will enter, let me make this a little bit bigger. We will enter the URL for the application in the URL bar. What you will notice is that since the application or the environment is configured for SAML-based authentication against Active Directory, I'm presented with a list of users who have previously authenticated to Azure AD. In this particular case, my user is Azure user 2. I'll pick this user and provide this user credential. Once the user is authenticated, I'll be routed back to the Google Cloud environment where the application is hosted. And as you can see, I'm successfully logged in to the application. To highlight single sign-on, I'm going to select another application that is hosted on Google Cloud and create a new tab, enter the URL for the second application. And what you'll notice is that this time around, I am not challenged for authentication, and the user is allowed access to the application. So next I'm going to dive into as to what type of configurations exist between the Google Cloud and the Azure AD. Let me sign off here. And to start off with, what we have here on the Azure AD side is on the Azure Active Directory, we have an enterprise application for Google that is configured. In fact, we've got two applications configured here. I'll make it a little bit bigger. We've got a Google Cloud single sign-on as well as provisioning. So you can configure Azure AD for single sign-on, SAML-based single sign-on with Google Cloud, as well as you can provision users from Azure Active Directory to Google Cloud. So we'll look at the configuration for the Google Cloud Enterprise application on Azure AD side. We are interested in the configuration for the SAML, single sign-on, and you'll see some SAML-based information that's been provided into this enterprise application on Azure AD side, the Google login, some of the other notification things like that, what the login URL is, what the Azure AD identifier is. Similarly, if we go to the Google Cloud environment, so I'll log in there. And we'll so here, this is the admin console for Google Cloud Identity Cloud Service, and here we'll go in security, and what you will see here is that in one of these tabs for configuring single sign-on with a third-party identity provider, you will notice the checkbox is checked here for setting up single sign-on with third-party provider, and we have the information sign-in URL for Microsoft Azure Active Directory, as well as the sign-out page, as well as the certificate verification certificate that's been uploaded, and that's all that needs to be done. The two applications that we try to access are protected within Google Cloud through the BeyondCorp Enterprise. It's asking me to enter my and I'll just show you how those applications are protected here. Oops, sorry. So what you'll notice is these two applications are currently protected through BeyondCorp, and this is the first application I entered, Redmine. What you will notice is in the list of users that are authorized to access this application is the user that I use, which is Azure 2. Same goes for the second application, and you will also notice that the same user is authorized to access this application. You can have some other authorization rules set up here, but for this particular use case, that's all I wanted to show. Thank you very much for your time.
Ever since 2011, we have been leveraging BeyondCorp security model, also known as Zero Trust, to protect access to our internal resources. In the past few years, we have made it easier for you to adopt the same model for your apps, APIs, and infrastructure through context-aware access capabilities that are natively built into Google Cloud Platform. We have enhanced our context-aware access capabilities in Cloud Identity Aware Proxy to help you protect SSH and RDP access to your virtual machines without needing to provide your VMs with public IP addresses and without having to set up bastion hosts. You can now control access to VMs based on users' identity and context, so meaning device security status, location. In addition, VMs protected by Cloud IAP do not require any changes and no separate infrastructure deployment. And this is critical, so even if a malicious user was able to gain access to your credentials, the context policies, for example, device policies, location from where the connection is coming from, will add another layer of protection. So right now you're seeing the Google Cloud console. Within the console, I am within Compute Engine where my VM instances are defined. So as you can see, I have a VM instance that's deployed called Linux VM that's deployed in US Central 1A. Now I want to make sure users are only able to access and connect or SSH to this VM only from US regions only and not outside of the US. So let's see how this works. Within the Google Cloud Console, you don't have to go anywhere else. I have under the identity aware proxy, I have my SSH and TCP resources defined, and one of those resources is the VM that I just showed you, which was the Linux VM. So if I highlight that VM, I can see, which users can connect to this VM. And if I look at this policy, the IAP tunnel, secure tunnel user condition, here I have defined my user to be able to access this resource from SSH. So the access policies from a context perspective are configured. So let's test this policy. So here I have my terminal window. I'm gonna type in gcloud compute SSH, name of my VM, and then zone where this VM is in, and hit enter. Now since I'm connecting, this laptop that I'm connecting from is within the US, I should be able to connect from my machine. So let's see if let's see the other way around, where if my machine is outside of the continental of United States, am I able to connect to this VM or not? So now I am in another instance within Google Cloud, where this instance is deployed in Europe, and I'm going to try connecting to my Linux VM machine that I had defined earlier from this machine. So if I type in gcloud compute SSH, name of my VM, and then zone, what I'll see is that this user from outside of the US is unable to connect, and as you see, it's editing out, you're not authorized, and this is where the user identity plus the context aware access comes into play. Thank you.